Hello everyone, Spider Fanboy here, and even though I literally finished recording part 1, I really want to jump into recording part 2. So we're going to pick up with what if Deku developed full cowling early? We just left off with the events of um, the first My Hero Academia movie. We're going to be moving on to the summer camp training arc, and the whole shebang is going to go down right now. Last we left off, Melissa was taken into All Might's custody and has moved to Japan to continue her education and her work at UA support course in third year. All Might and Nezu were able to pull some strings, and they considered it a last minute favor to Dave, a last favor to him, now that he's going to be locked up. Deku has developed his full cowl and a secondary technique, full drive, that allows him to make full use of the energy of One for All instead of just letting it leak out around his body. He's able to handle around 15% of One for All and has developed his connection to float. Also in full cowl, he can make jumps in percentages, but he cannot do so for full drive. He can jump up to around 20% if he needs to, and can possibly go further, but he usually makes at most 5% increased jumps. He's developed more his relationship with Uraraka, and here Todoroki and Bakugo, since they're training under Endeavor in their internship, have a much more solid rivalry with each other, a much more established banter, and Bakugo's character development has kind of been kicked into high gear. But yeah, we're going to move into our training trip in the forest. Everyone is notified of the training trip. They had been notified after their finals, and now they're all getting ready to go. It's going to be the same when they end up arriving. There's not going to be too many differences with them arriving, except for the fact that maybe since Deku, Bakugo, Todoroki, and by extension the majority of the other class, but mainly in like Uraraka, Tenya, and possibly Yayurozu and Suyu, they're gonna be a little stronger because Deku's friend group kind of is more. It's gonna be more diverse than it was in canon. It's more Deku, Ida, Ochako, Suyu, Yayurozu, because here Deku is the vice president. He stepped down to vice president and allowed Momo to be president, and Jiro as a consequence, um, and obviously Todoroki. But yeah, since like the big three are much more stronger and everyone else is a little bit stronger, more developed in their skills, they're able to get there maybe like an hour or two earlier than in canon. So instead of like late into the afternoon, maybe somewhere near midday, probably like instead of like 6 in the evening, they get there around like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He meets with Koda, and he's completely in shock about the fact that a kid is trying to punch him in the balls, and he does still get hit. He has this whole conversation with the Wild Pussycats, and they're able to settle in. They're able to get some lunch and get some time to relax through for the first day. They have their second day. They start working on upgrading their quirks as the villains begin to gather and plan out their invasion. Deku is working on float as well as his combat capability. He's learning to employ a similar fighting style to Gran Torino. He's bouncing around between the trees in his spar against Tiger, and he's also building up his percentage of One for All. He's building up his ability to use float and full cowl for now, together in conjunction with one another. And he's able to get as he's sparring with Tiger, he ends up entering halfway through the sparring. He's told to enter into or halfway through their training throughout the day. He's told to use his full drive technique, and he ends up moving almost too fast for himself to handle. Sorry about the gas. Jesus, excuse me. Um, but yeah, he's getting used to how speedy he is and this new fighting style of bouncing around between the trees and everything, and trying to move without having to need to bounce around to be able to stop himself and send himself in the directions without like losing too much speed or wasting too much time. That's going to be what he's getting used to. And he's able to make some decent progress by the day that they get to their test of courage. Like by the end of that day, he's made some decent progress. And he's also noticed that whenever he's sparring against Tiger or having any kind of spar now, occasionally he'll be hit with like a minor headache. He gets hit with like a little minor spike of pain in his head. He's not really sure what it was, but he suspects it has something to do with One for All. Um, ever since the events of, ever since he developed Float, Gran Torino and All Might have been working on gathering some information regarding the past wielders of One for All and all of their quirks. They've already come up with the theory that he may unlock the rest of their quirks. And, well, this is about to be confirmed. As they're having their test of courage, before Deku ends up going out, and like the same people who failed in canon still failed, so he's still left on his own. But he ends up seeing like a brief vision of the ghosts of One for All. Once again, they're much more clear, since he can technically access 20%. So they're much more clear, or he can access 20% in full cowl. So his synchronization is much higher than it was at this point. He sees the ghosts of One for All, and he's wondering what the hell is about to happen, if he's about to be prepared to unlock another quirk, and then he feels like a brief headache, a brief yet very powerful headache hit him as the blue flames end up engulfing the forest. The poison ends up engulfing the other side, and we end up getting into the attack of the villain vanguard squad, or whatever they're called. Deku ends up making the decision. He talks to Mandalay. He's like, "I know where Kodo is. I can find him," and he speeds off to find him. He speeds off in full cowling at around 18%, and he gets there much. I'll say that he gets there a little earlier, but either way, Kodo is still terrified that his parents' murderer has found him. Maybe Muscular only comes into view as they're about to leave, and he has this fight with him. He can instantly tell that this guy's a danger, so he doesn't hold back. He jumps into 20% of full cowling and tries to meet him with a punch. He slides back a little bit, but he does tell him that was a decent punch, but it wasn't strong enough. He tries to hit him, and while Deku does feel another stab of pain go through his head, he's able to get out of the way due to his getting used to it in his training with Tiger. So he's able to get out of the way, he's able to roll out of the way. He moves Koda a little bit further before jumping back into the battle. He knows he can't really get away from this guy without bringing him towards everyone else, so it's best that he takes him out now. He seemingly powers down only to buff up in his normal state. His clothes are stretched out a little bit because of it, but his shoes at least were specifically altered so that they can handle his expansion in size. Or maybe his whole wardrobe was changed out ever since he developed full drive. Because the more he uses it, the higher percentage he is when he uses it, and the better he gets at it, the more he ends up expanding in size. So, he ends up bulking up, which Muscular definitely notices, and he charges forward with 15% in full drive, and he hits him as hard as he can, and it's enough to cause a decent enough shockwave that Muscular actually stumbles back, and Deku begins dodging his blows and delivering heavy ones of his own, and like occasionally he'll let his energy flow out. He'll let One for All energy flow out in the form of some electricity that'll coat his fist, and even though it doesn't hit as hard, it does send his muscles that he's formed over himself. They end up starting to spasm. So Muscular gets a little bit annoyed, but he also is having fun. So he decides to take the battle more seriously. He charges forward for a full power strike, and Deku decides to meet him with as much power as he can muster. He lets himself shift back into full cowling because he knows it'll if he goes full cowling 100%. Sorry, 1 second. Hello everyone. Sorry for the brief pause sorry for the sudden pause. Had to help my mom come in with some groceries. But fight against Muscular. He ends up meeting him with 100% full cowl, and this is for the first time he's really starting to feel the excruciating pain of having to upkeep 100% without any kind of focus in like the form of the full gauntlet. and that migraine of his, that headache of his, is starting to form into a very serious migraine. And again, sorry if you hear this. Hold on, let me go on ahead and put a pillow so that that's not creating so much noise into the mic. Let me see. Yeah, that definitely cushioned it a bit. Yeah, plenty of damage. It's the most excruciating pain he's ever felt in his life. He's not as desensitized to it as he is in canon, but he is able to still stand his ground, despite the splitting migraine and the pain in his arm. And here he's using both of his hands since he never broke any of them. Full drive was enough to enhance himself that he didn't break his arm when he blocked the punch. Ooh. Let me take a deep breath there for a second. But yeah, he's using both of his arms to hold him back, and he's able to manage himself pretty well. He does briefly lose consciousness, but Kota steps in and he ends up completely backhanding Muscular and sending him flying away. But because of this, both of his arms are severely damaged, and like this is the first critical damage he's ever done to his arms since his fights against the Zero Pointer in his battle against Todoroki. Against the Zero Pointer, he only damaged his right arm, and against Todoroki, he only damaged his left. But here, he's caused immense damage to both, near catastrophic. And that migraine is refusing to go away. It's died down, but it's refusing to go away. So, but Deku still prioritizes everyone else, so he gathers Kota, and they end up heading out. Yeah. You left it there? Go on ahead, go. Close the door. There you go. My brother needed something. um, yeah, he ends up heading out. They meet with Aizawa. He chastises Suzuku. He's always gotten into his own kind of trouble, but it's the first time he's seen up close the kind of damage he can do to himself. So, but he does still give the permission. Like, all students have permission to fight, and Deku does share the information that he and Bakugo, and since while he's on better terms with Bakugo, he's not like always forgiving him, so he doesn't call him Kachan. He has enough mind to call him Bakugo, despite the adrenaline high. But he does tell Mandalay everyone is able to fight, and himself and Bakugo are the main priority targets. And he randomly lists off like a few he may consider to be secondary targets, based off of their quirks. He mentions Tokuyami and Todoroki being the two other strongest members and having such fame, and he also mentions Ida for his connection to the Ingenium family, and the battle against Stain. So he makes all of that clear, so everyone's going to be on the lookout for all of them specifically, but he does still run off. Maybe he's able to take down Spinner himself, just using his since he has a better handle on shoot style. He actually developed it early, so he's able to completely blitz Spinner, but he has to keep it down to full Cowl. The electricity that's letting the energy run wild through his body is actually keeping his mind off of the fact that his arms are completely mangled. He does still end up meeting up with he still meets up with Shoji and everyone. He gets two casts from Uraraka, and while she's tempted to follow him, he ends up convincing her to try and find anyone else that she can manage, and to help anyone else that she can. Like he briefly brings up like the fact that she wants to be like 13, she has to save as many people as she can. He'll be doing the same. So he ends up rushing off and he meets up with Shoji. He has that same plan that he did in canon with Shoji to lure them over to where Bakugo and Todoroki are. And Bakugo and Todoroki, even though they are bantering, they do have like a little bit of a better relationship. They know how to work around each other at least. More so, Todoroki knows how to work around Bakugo and his personality. But they're able to take down Moonfish with the help of Tokuyami arriving, and they're also both able to calm down Tokuyami. And yeah, like I said, they still have their meetup with Asui and Uraraka. I don't remember if that happened before or after, but whatever. They end up meeting with them, and they're all traveling together in the group. They're a bit more aware of the fact that they have to watch out for Bakugo, Deku, and in Deku's opinion, possibly Tokuyami. but they do end up still being captured. Compress is a master thief, and they all end up chasing after him. Specifically, um, Shoji, Todoroki, and Deku are still launched off, and Deku's actually he tells Uraraka to focus on keeping the float on Shoji and Todoroki while he allows himself to float. Which is the first time anyone else is hearing about this. No one else really knew what kind of training he was doing. Only Uraraka kind of had an idea on what he was going to be training. And she's also the only one who knows he has float. So they end up landing, similar to they do in canon. They have a similar confrontation, but due to the fact that I say that due to the fact because of the blinding pain, he yeah, he's not as adjusted to the pain. So even though he's faster, he's also been running himself more ragged with a much more intensive technique. He does try to charge forward, but it doesn't end up doing anything when he ends up collapsing due to the sheer pain of his arms and the migraine really spiking in intensity due to the fact that he's in the presence of all of these villains. So he does end up collapsing, and here he actually ends up passing out from sheer exhaustion and pain. Or maybe he is still able to get that gut-wrenching scream out before he does. Um, but yeah, he now has to deal with the fact that he has danger sense, and that despite the fact that it's supposed to help him, it really didn't end up doing much whatsoever. Um, but Togoyami is still the one saved, but Bakugo is the one who is kidnapped. Uh, and Deku has to kind of deal with that. They are all taken in to be hospitalized, and Inko once again is having a bit of a minor heart attack. She keeps kind of like getting her confidence reaffirmed, but when she sees the state that her son is in, for like the first time in a while, the confidence in her son is a bit shaken, as his own is. But when he ends up gathering his resolve, and he still makes his plan to go on and save Bakugo. And here he decides, since his mother has been through so much, he actually talks to her, and he also makes a promise to talk to Uraraka when this is all over, which kind of gets her worried because of the kind of way he's talking. But she does agree that there's some things that they need to talk about. But yeah, Izuku decides to be upfront with Inko. He tells her about his plan to go with some of his friends to try to track down Bakugo, and she does everything she can to try to talk him out of it. But he makes his stance clear, and she once again kind of gains a little bit of a confidence boost, but she's also just as worried. So she makes him promise that no matter what kind of situation they're in, he has to prioritize his life above everything else. Or most importantly, he has to prioritize coming home to him and having his talk with Uraraka above all else, which he reluctantly agrees to. She knows that it's kind of unrealistic to ask of him of all people, but she also recognizes that, yeah, she needs her son to come home. He's a student. He should not be putting himself in such danger. So we're going to have everything go just about the same, the Camino arc, in regards to it. Um, Deku is definitely trying to stay out of All for One's way, especially since he's developed or he tries to stay away from All for One. So they're gonna come up with that same plan. It goes just about the same as in canon. Um, Uraraka, maybe she does join. We'll say that she actually does join. She decides to join after talking to Inko. Maybe she told him about the talk that she had with Midori with Deku, and she decided to join to help reassure Inko and also kind of for herself to make sure that Deku does end up coming home. And she just helps them in helping them all float, everyone else except for Deku once more. And this is where they all kind of have to. They kind of like briefly realize, oh, his quirk is much more than what it appears to be. But he also has that brief headache, another migraine that ends up forming in the presence of All for One. But he's able to come up with the same plan as in canon. They launch off into the sky, and everyone else, specifically Yaoyorozu and Uraraka, escape from the scene. They flee from the scene, and everyone is watching the battle against All Might and All for One. And I would consider that maybe it goes a little bit easier in All Might's favor. Um, learning so much. As a teacher, you learn from your students about the same that you end up teaching them. So maybe he actually decides to bring out some kicks into the battle. He mixes up his fighting style and he coordinates with Gran Torino. He keeps a bit of a calmer mind since he knows for a fact he has to get home and make sure that Izuku can finish up his training. So instead of finishing it off with just one buffed up arm, he's in good enough shape to finish it completely as All Might. And while he does, he's able to buff himself back up from his skinny form and finish the fight completely in his buff form. And he does falter after the fact, after delivering that United States of Smash, but he does buff up. He points his finger out, and as he speaks his final sentence of "Next it's your turn," he begins to deflate. And this is where Deku has his breakdown. And here, Bakugo is not the only one to witness it. Uraraka is as well. She's right there next to him, and while she comforts him, she also notices the timing of how he said that, and then Deku kind of broke down into tears. And she definitely has more questions, but she knows to save them for later. Here we have yeah, we have the home visits, and here the talk between Deku, All Might, and Inko is much more personal, and Aizawa is actually brought into the fold at this point. Um, while All Might kind of initially insists on doing it on his own, he also trusts the fact that at the end of the day, it's young Midoriya's secret to reveal in regards to One for All. So he does ask, "Can I go ahead and ask something first?" And he does. He goes to Midoriya and he actually asks them if they want Aizawa to be involved in it. And after some talking to from Inko, he decides, yeah, he should be brought in. So they actually have a four-way conversation between the four of them. And Aizawa asks if he actually has told anyone his age about his struggles. And that briefly gets Deku to pause, and he's like, no. And he ends up encouraging him, like, it may be a foolish thing, but at the end of the day, you need people your own age who you can talk to about your struggles. So get yourself a group of friends that you know you can trust, bring them in on the situation. If you're returning to UA, that is. And after a more private conversation and once more a vow to protect her son from All Might, she does allow it. And Deku moves into the dorms, as does everyone else. And as they're moving into the dorms, when when the group that was there to save Bakugo, they all meet up to go talk to Asui. Um, Deku decides he wants to talk to them about something. He's willing to trust Kirishima because he trusts him and the fact that he's close to Bakugo, that he was willing to go so far. So this is the group that he's going to bring in about One for All. It's right now it's Uraraka, Asui, or Ochako, Asui, Suyu, whatever, Tenya, Ida, Momo, Todoroki, and Bakugo, who's listening from afar because he kind of felt he also wanted to follow along. Bakugo once again kind of suspects he wasn't told during the end of after their battle, but he's been kind of piecing things together, and he does end up confronting Bakugo, and they talk about things. They're gonna talk about things on their own later. But the group right now that he's telling is Suyu, Ochako, Tenya, Momo, and Todoroki. Shoto. He lets them in on the secret, and they all talk. They talk well into the night, which Aizawa reluctantly allows, since they were all. And he kind of puts in a disguise as giving them detention for having snuck out and gone against his orders, and Asui for knowing about it, or just so that they can have their talk and mend their relationship. Whatever. He gives some kind of excuse to the rest of the class, and they talk about things well into the night. He answers some questions. He tells them a little bit how One for All works, who he got it from, and how it's going to be developing moving forward. And he gives them a little bit of background on All for One. And they all go to bed, one kind of processing this information. They have their little dorm contest eventually, and this ends up bringing everyone's minds off of the intensity of everything, and they all begin to work for their license exams. They're all preparing. Deku is getting used to his new advanced suit that I was talking about. If you search up Deku's upgrade, Vocal Pineapple Academia, He talks about a really cool redesign that someone was able to come up with, and it's basically going to be he's going to have that suit, but it's going to have the iron soles. It's going to have the Air Force function for his gauntlets as well, so he can shoot the air blast from his fingertips, and it is also going to have um, the full gauntlet under it, or the mid gauntlets. They're going to be mid gauntlets, like what Deku has as his vigilante state. So since like I mentioned, Melissa has moved to Japan, and is now studying at UA for the support course in third year. She helps people with their redesigns. Helps Ochako develop her. She works on her grappling hooks with Mei Hatsume, and a proper heads-up display for her helmet, and some gadgets that she can use to help float around debris and like move them out of the way. All that kind of cool stuff. Removes Momo's need for her book. Instead, gives her like a little heads-up display or like some kind of handheld computer that she can use instead of that book case on her back. Helps her properly redesign her costume. Same for Hakakure. Maybe gives some gear to like gives Kaminari that gear of his, and like gives Jiro some kind of like Black Canary kind of sonic scream for her to use, so she can plug in her jacks and she can actually let out a present mic type of sonic scream, and like some speakers to use from her wrists as well as her boots. All that kind of cool stuff. Everyone's getting some upgrades. Um, yeah, and instead of having to develop shoot style, Izuku's properly developing a fighting style based around his ability to use float and his newly awakened danger sense. And he's also trying to properly work himself up to 18% in full drive. He's trying to get to 20%, but he thinks 18% is a good middle ground. He's developing his percentage, and they eventually do get to their license exam. We learn about Twice and Overhaul. The League of Villains, they all have their meeting, and as the license exam occurs, everything is going to be going much more smoothly for UA, or specifically for Class 1A. The class is a little more synergized, especially with the groups of like with Deku's Deku Squad, which also now includes Momo and Todoroki. Yeah, they're going to be much more involved. Everyone's teamwork is going to be a lot better. Deku is able to handle himself and adjust his attitude in like consoling the civilians much more quickly, so he's not going to be losing as many points. He's going to be scoring a little higher in that category, and then instead of Todoroki going off on his own, maybe he ends up on his own because he ends up getting separated. Like he ends up getting intentionally separated. He tried tried to stick around with like Momo and Jiro, and Momo has already, like I said, since the final exam went about the same, so she's gotten past her confidence issues, and that whole thing with Psycho and Telly, whatever her name was, goes a lot more smoother. Maybe Todoroki eventually is able to get back with them and is able to warm up the area so Suyu doesn't fall into that like hibernation state. So he's able to warm up the area and keep her from falling into that hibernation state. Toru's making better use of her quirk since she's had her improved costume that that's made from her own DNA. So she's able to use her quirk a little bit better because she learns about that facet of her quirk, how it can refract light. So maybe she's a little bit more better with her skill in that. And it's mainly going to be in Deku and Uraraka. So Deku's still going to have his little confrontation with Keimi, who is Toga in disguise. Even though he can't properly sense her, Danger Sense is able to recognize the danger, and he's able to get out of the way. He ends up exposing her almost immediately instead of waiting and carrying her around. And Uraraka, and Sero, they all work together to take everyone out. They all get their points and they pass the first portion of the exam with with relative ease. And like I said, they end up going into the part where they have to rescue the civilians, which is much more easier. Um, Uraraka and Midoriya are kind of still in a will they, won't they, but they're much more sure of their feelings for each other. So she's not really feeling too much turmoil in regards to how she feels about him. More so like it's similar to like should I distract him? Should I distract myself? Since she's been let in about the fact of like the secret of One for All, but she also wants to be able to be there for him. So she's more conflicted on whether she should or shouldn't, since she actually has some good reasons for either or, and she's definitely been getting some encouragement from Ika. But they end up moving forward into the second and eventually final stage of the exam. Since Todoroki is just a bit more open, since he's more sociable with all of his friends, he actually verbally questions Inasa on like what exactly his problem is with him, and is able to and tries to get more of an answer than oh you look so much like your father. He's able to get more of a vague answer, and Inasa ends up clearing the air a bit more, like a lot earlier, and they end up having like Todoroki kind of points out that this really isn't the time or place for that, especially when Gang Orca comes in with his attack. And while they do briefly mess up, Todoroki is able to get to Inasa that they need to put these things aside. And Deku can't agree more as he jumps into the battle and is able to use full drive at 20%. He's finally got into it. He finally feels confident enough that he can use 20% full drive to land a full power kick that he boosts with his jet boosters on his legs, directly into Gang Orca's arm, which basically destroys the weights that he has. It's like that weird van brace that he was wearing on his arm. It's like a weighted van brace, similar to what they gave to the teachers for their exam, specifically All Might. But yeah, he lands a very powerful kick that is able to completely shatter it, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to go more all out." He ends up stepping away so that Inasa and Todoroki, who have been talking a little bit so that they can come up with a plan, end up coming up with that same combination move. And since they're actually focused, they're not weakened and on the floor. They're actually able to keep up the flame tornado, and Deku is able to take out all of Gang Orca's little sidekicks that are in the area. And everyone else is handling themselves better, but even though Bakugo's character development has kicked up in regards to his personal relationships, it's just about the same in regards to other people. So he's still gonna end up failing. Maybe he doesn't fail as badly, but he's still gonna end up failing. Um, Todoroki, he lost enough points so that he just barely passed. So he's not going to fail, but he just barely passed. Bakugo is going to be the only one to fail here. Sorry, got a little bit of a notification. But yeah, Bakugo is going to be the only one to fail here, and everyone else passes. Deku in particular scored very high. He did well in rescuing civilians. He was quick and decisive. In the first part, he was able to show great teamwork, and he was very decisive on the battlefield. So he's definitely showed himself off as being very capable. And after the exams, we have the start of the second term. Post the we get into the second term, and instead of having a full-on battle with Bakugo, they instead confront each other and they have a talk. And it's definitely a heated conversation, and Bakugo almost snaps into battle mode. But he ends up explaining. Izuku eventually decides to explain everything. He explains One for All, and he explains All for One. They're sorry about my family. It's nothing too crazy though. But yeah, he decides to explain to Bakugo. He lets him in on the secret with Aizawa and Toshinori are both supervising the conversation. And they end up returning to the dorms a little earlier. And here Deku and Uraraka have a proper conversation. And they decide to enter a bit of a tentative relationship. They're testing the waters with each other. But Uraraka makes it clear that at the end of the day, she wants to be able to stand by Deku's side. She wants to be able to support him in any way that she can, because she's come to a bit of a personal realization, especially seeing the burden that Deku's putting on himself and the way he decided to open up. she's asking herself questions about who saves the heroes when the heroes are saving the people. So she makes it clear that she's going to be by his side no matter what they are to each other. But she'd be happy. She wouldn't really have any problem if they were a little bit more than just friends. So they're kind of in a relationship. They're gonna be testing the waters. They go on occasional dates. They hang out, and there's no house arrest. So Deku and Izuku are or Izuku and Bakugo are there for the battle against Mirio, and it ends up going more in Class 1A's favor. He does still flinch when he gets hit with that move of um, of Mirio's, where like he ghosts his hand, the Phantom Touch or whatever it's called, where he ghosts his hands through your face. But Danger Sense is able to kick in, and he's able to block the attack, and he's able to maneuver himself around the battlefield using float. He's able to keep himself off the ground, so he's not as surprised by any of his attacks. And once again, this is Class 1A is still kind of getting used to the fact that he's developed such abilities, but they're also kind of accepting the fact that he's broken OP. Um, Deku's is OP hacks, please nerf. But yeah, he's able to handle himself against Mirio almost evenly using 20% full cowl. And this is where things are going to get interesting. We get into to their work studies. Um, Bakugo once again considers going back to Endeavor, but when he ends up hearing from Izuku that he wants to go under Night Eye to better train his danger sense and refine his fighting style alongside Mirio. Deku actually considers going as well. He considers asking if he can, um, and he does consider asking Mirio, and he actually goes through with it. So it's actually Bakugo and Deku. They both go to All Might. They talk to him about his relationship with Night Eye after they're both proposed to. Night Eye actually has an interest in both of them as well. Bakugo because of he wants to stomp out the potential of another endeavor, and he wants to see what Midoriya is made out of. So he sends them both the invite through Mirio, and they both talk to All Might about it. And like he clarifies, like, well, I can go with you too. I have to. It's best that I clear things out with him myself. We had a bit of a falling out, and he tells him more of the specifics that he had a prophecy of his death using his foresight. But he believes that just because he's never been wrong before doesn't mean he can't be wrong now. And either way, that still leaves him with about a year or so of time to prepare the next generation, which kind of unsettles the two of them, and they end up talking to the rest of their group about it. More so Deku than Bakugo, but they talk to like the rest of the Deku squad about it, and Uraraka is like, well, this guy may have like a lot of history, but at the end of the day, like All Might said, it's your quirk now, so you don't really have anything to prove. If you want to, you can go. You can probably learn a lot from him, but at the end of the day, you have to remember you don't really have anything to prove. Anything you've needed to prove, you prove to all the people that matter. So she helps him like really reassure himself. He's appreciative of it, and like everyone gives a little awe. Tsuyu gives like a blunt little comment. Uh, Gets them all into a blushing mess. But yeah, they have like a little nice fun moment between the friends. And Mirio, instead of Mirio and Izuku, or yeah, it'll be Mirio and Izuku who still end up encountering Eri. And Bakugo was say either he was oh, I should cover actually meeting Night Eye first. What am I doing jumping like that? They end up meeting with Night Eye. All Might actually talks to him first, and they clear a bit of the air between them, but there's still some differences between them, especially when Night Eye does question Izuku. Although with how sure of himself he is and how capable he is, he's able to pass his little test as his Bakugo. He's able to show a decent amount of progress. Oh wait, I completely forgot the fact he can't go. Okay, no, Bakugo doesn't go. What am I doing? He didn't pass. He still failed, even if he just barely failed. He still failed, so he's gonna have to do remedial classes instead. Screw Bakugo. What am I talking about? Um, we'll say that yeah, and Shoto still once again goes to um do his work study with his father. Um, Maybe he messes with Bakugo about it. He's like, "Yeah, I'm getting much stronger, even if it is under my asshole of a father." And Bakugo's like, "Shut up, I feel it." But yeah, no, Izuku is still able to pass his little. He's able to get past his confrontation with Night Eye. All Might is able to clear the air with the guy, and Izuku becomes his intern and begins some training, probably around the same weekend, the same amount of time. Mirio and Izuku do have their encounter with Overhaul and Eri, and it goes about the same as in canon, despite the fact Deku definitely wants to get away from this guy who's radiating danger due to danger sense. It's like flaring up around the guy. Um, but they do end up having to give Eri back to Overhaul, and here instead of having to now begin and learn the truth of instead of just now having to learn the truth of All Might and Night Eye, he instead talks to All Might about his decision and how he feels about it, and he reassures him that next time he will save the girl. Um, and because of this, Izuku decides to ramp up his training with Mirio, and he does end up sharing with the group what he ended up learning about Eri, despite the fact that he should be keeping his mouth shut. He does just briefly says that to the group that like he made a decision that he's not sure about, but he's going to rectify the second he gets the next chance. And they all have full confidence in him, so it kind of helps him feel a little better. Um, all of them begin their internships. They're all with the same people. Momo and Suyu do still go to Ryukyu, but thanks to Momo being around, she actually joins the two since she's a part of the group. Kirishima has his internship, and as does Ida. Ida decides to also join with Kirishima since he's a little bonded to the group, especially since Bakugo's been hanging around Deku a little bit. So he's interacting with the group, and Ida is going to be around, and he's going to intern with Fatgum. Now you might be like, oh, what could he possibly learn from Fatgum? What could have Kirishima possibly? No, I'm kidding. Kirishima kind of makes sense, but if not with Fatgum, we can easily say he interns under someone else. Whatever. He goes to around his same internship. Um, yeah. Red Riot, Irrevity, and Froppy, they all make the news. That stuff still goes about the same. And the everyone is planning for the Ares rescue. Izuku has been specifically training, and he's also been doing some like quirkless sparring with Ochako, um, and furthering their mastery over float and zero gravity, respectively. They've been training with one another so that they can get used to more aerial-based combat, and they've also been training with their senpais. Uraraka has been getting some help in aerial combat with Nejire, and Deku's getting better with his predictability and handling of danger sense by training with Sir Night-Eye and Mirio. Mainly Mirio, but Sir Night-Eye does make his appearance every now and again, provide some tips, and even enters the fray every now and again. Um, Everyone has switched out to their winter uniforms, and Lockrock appears to discover the villain hideout, and finally we end up getting the confrontation. Um, yeah, they end up having their confrontation against Chisaki. Okay, this is where this timeline ends, but I don't think I'm really gonna need it going forward. But this is about they end up going on to have their battle against Chisaki and everyone else. They're going to face off against the Shiai Hisagi, and the main difference is that Momo is here, and she's much more capable than ever than in canon. Um, we'll just say that she's able to pull some Wolverine claws out and stuff. She's getting used to being more creative with her creations. She's able to pull them out much faster, and she's doing things like forming the weapons, keeping them in her body, or maybe she interns under Fatgum to learn how to. Yeah, we'll say she interns under Fatgum actually. She interns under Fatgum to learn about the eating aspects of her quirk, what kind of things will give her the most energy without affecting her physique in a way that would slow her down. allows her to build up muscle and fat at the same time, and really develop herself physically so that she can keep up with all of her allies and potential opponents. And she's able to make the most out of her quirks. She's forming them. She's forming like blades along her arms, armor forming around her skin, and then she learns how to even reseed it back into her body so that she can properly like reabsorb some lipids and conserve her energy. So yeah, that's going to be what kind of training she's accomplished under Fat Gum and everyone, and with Tamaki and Kirishima. So she's going to be like a bit more of a front lines fighter instead of support now, because of how she's developed herself. And we end up getting into the Shihai Hasaiki raid. We have the Ryukyu squad against Rikia, and we can just easily say that this goes a little bit easier. Ochako and Suyu are a little bit closer than they are in canon, especially with the shared secret. So they've been upping their training now that they've been let in on like Izuku's whole secret, and they're able to work with much more synergy in the battle. So they're not going to be held. They're not going to be holding anyone back here. We end up getting Sun Eater versus Setsuno, Hojo, and Tabe. We can easily say that that goes the same. He seems to be able to restrain them pretty easily. And we had the Battle of Spears and Shields. And this goes about the same. It's possible that Momo makes a bit of an intervention, is able to take care of that guy with the barriers by distracting him and getting him to form his barriers in different positions so that Kirishima can better deal blows against Kendo Rappa. Oh, sorry about that. But either way, we get the Night Eye. The Night Eye squad goes against Toga and Twice. And Deku decides he doesn't want to waste any time. He really wants to get to Eri, so he blitzes everyone in the room that he can. Toga is just barely able to dodge out of the way of a strike from him, and is able to avoid getting herself knocked out. She slips away with Twice. And then we get the battle against Mimic, which again, Deku is folding everyone that he can as quickly as possible. Lemillion faces off against Shin and Deidoro, and eventually it's Deku and Lemillion versus Overhaul and Chronostasis. And the two of them combined are able to make quick work of Chisaki, so he is forced into absorbing everyone much earlier. Lemillion doesn't end up losing his quirk. He's able to keep he's able to distract Chisaki, or maybe Deku's able to distract Chisaki, and while Chronostasis does make to aim for Eri, Deku is able to quickly put his own armor in the way to keep the bullet from piercing any skin. Because he has those armored gauntlets and the armored shoulder pads, so he's able to get in the way, and it doesn't even pierce his own skin. And even if it does, he could probably catch it at this point with how fast he is. And even if he can't catch it, he can definitely get Eri out of the way instead of having to stand in front of it. So, no losing any quirk, and if anything, a quirk erasing bullet is actually wasted. And because of this ends up enraging Overhaul, who jumps to absorbing all of his underlings much quicker. And here, Lemillion and Deku end up trying to flee, and he pushes his mid gauntlets. He considers pushing his mid gauntlets to battle against Overhaul at around 50 in full drive. But thanks to Eri's help, he takes off his gauntlets, and he ends up taking off his gauntlets and removing the mid gauntlets underneath them. He hands them to Lemillion, and he tells him to get out of there. And he ends up carrying Eri on his back in a similar manner to in canon. Lemillion lends his cape so that he can protect her, so that Deku can protect her. Lemillion ended up lending his cape to her so that she could still use it to comfort herself halfway through the battle. And they end up having a similar final battle, but Deku is able to completely fold him by instead of just using full cowling, he uses full drive. And even because of the fact that he has a much more resilient body, he ends up dealing a similar amount of damage as in canon. So Eri is still able to cancel out any damage he can potentially do to himself. And he ends up taking Chisaki down much more quickly than in canon. And when Eri's quirk is about to spiral out of control, before, since they ended up ending the battle early, Aizawa has to catch up a bit. So he actually lets full Cowl take over, and he lets his stockpiled energy of One for All um, cancel out and calm down Aries' own stockpiled energy. So he's actually able to rein her in until Aizawa arrives and shuts both their quirks off. And fun fact, since we have the girls being more competent around instead of just sticking to the ground and sticking with a dying Night Eye and Momo around, we can very easily say that she was able to, with her help, as well as with her help, with Momo's help being around Night Eye, she was able to help Night Eye get out of the way of that pillar that would have pierced him and left him with a giant hole in his stomach. So Night Eye isn't actually going to die. We can still say that he's critically injured, but he's not going to die. He's going to be out of commission for a while, though. The League of Villains and everything, they still have their same confrontation, and Gran Torino still ends up capturing Kurogiri, and they learn more about Gigantomachia being out there. But yeah, the League ends up, they still, oh, sorry about that. They still have their confrontation with taking down they take away Chisaki's arms. That still goes the same as in canon. And then we have our remedial course arc, which is only really Bakugo and Kami, and I don't know, maybe Monoma. I'm pretty sure he also failed the licensing exam. But yeah, not really gonna be having Todoroki and Inasa here. It's mainly gonna be Bakugo and Kami. Maybe we get some Bakugo Kami action going on. Maybe not. He does make friends with her though, since his personality is a little less of him, a little less Bakugo basically. He's further along in his character development. So this goes about the same, just without Inasa and Todoroki. Then we get to the school festival, which it all ends up going down the same. Maybe Ochako and Deku have a little bit of a date, and ever since the Shihaya Hisaki thing, Deku was able to get a proper set of full gauntlets given to him that had been properly improved to handle his full drive at 100%, or at least she thinks so. They're definitely going to be able to hold up much better than what she made at Eye Island. So he gets a proper set of full gauntlets made for him to wear under his armor, to wear under his proper Air Force gauntlets, and he has a little bit of a date with Ochako. He completely is able to take care of Gentle Criminal and La Brava. That goes pretty easily, and they have their little festival, their little drum solo, their performance with Kyoka. It goes just about the same. Super easy. All of this is barely an inconvenience, and Deku has been further pushing his progress with One for All. He's been trying to push it. He's been trying to get to 25% by the time they go back out for their second not internships, work studies, their second round of work studies. He's been trying to get to 25% before then, and he's trying to see if maybe he can unlock another quirk of One for All. They end up having the whole hero billboard chart, and the battle with Endeavor, Hawks, and the High End goes about the same. I don't know, maybe he's developed a more explosive based ability to help him in the battle since his training with Bakugo, but it's basically about the same. Class 1A in their battle against Nejire and Sun Eater is about the same, except for the fact that Mirio is here, and he's actually taken on by Deku. He's actually taken on directly by Deku, and the two of them are able to match each other, since he never lost his quirk here, luckily enough. Then we get to the joint training battle. All of them go about the same. Deku does end up unlocking Black Whip here, similarly to what he does in canon, but he's able to rein it in a little bit better on his own. Maybe he's had some frustrations built up. Maybe Monoma decides to use a few different insults to get under Deku's skin. He does still unlock Black Whip, but it's not as out of control. And Ochako's able to give him a little bit of a pep talk. And while she does end up calling for Shinso to help him gain control, he's actually able to rein it in all by himself. And similar to in canon, he has a moment of brief control where he's able to catch those canisters. And this time it's I don't know if he ended up losing, but Deku Squad is definitely able to win. they're able to pull out a solid definitive win. Most of Class 1A is. And then we get to the Meta Liberation Army. Ooh, this is where things is going to get crazy. Okay, yeah. We're going to have our MLA, the whole Meta Liberation Army arc. The only thing that's really important here is Katsuki and Hiro. Katsuki and Shoto, their little debut as since Bakugo has kind of come around to hanging around Deku and everyone else, he actually decides eventually. Shoto decides on Frostburn, and Bakugo decides on what was it that he calls himself? Dynamite. He calls himself Dynamite. He ends up on his name of Dynamite. And everything on the side of the League of Villains goes about the same, but maybe Shigaraki's much more determined and sure of himself ever since his talk with Deku and his confrontation against him. Briefly, he saw him at Kamino Ward, and he's much more determined than ever before. So we can easily say that maybe he ends up reaching that development point in his quirk much earlier. But on the villain side, it goes about the same. But he's also made note of the fact that Deku is progressing really quickly, so he's gonna have to catch up. So he actually has a bit of a better handle on his quirk awakening than in canon. Here we get to the Heroes Rising film, and this whole thing is about the same. The battle against the Mummy and the Chimera goes more in 1A's favor. They're actually able to push them back instead of being nearly completely caught off guard. They're able to handle their own pretty well, as is Deku and Bakugo. Those two versus 9, they have much better. They have about the same level of synergy, but they're also much stronger. So they're able to handle themselves well enough against 9 that they're able to push him back without. And Deku doesn't have to risk that moment where he's almost at risk of losing One for All. He's actually able to prevent something like that from happening. Because he can see those weird holes in his hands, and from the dreams he's been having in regards to One for All and All for One, he can kind of recognize it. And Danger Sense is screaming at him whenever that guy reaches his hands out towards him. So he's able to piece together that he must have some kind of All for One related quirk. Either he has the quirk itself or some kind of copy of it, which he wouldn't be surprised if All for One had some kind of copy quirk. But he ends up getting away from him, and they have their rematch against the Chimera, and that completely goes in 1A's favor this time. They're able to take him down. Tsukuyomi and Pinky versus Slice goes in their favor. They're able to take him down similarly to in canon, although maybe since the Chimera is taken down much earlier, everyone is able to help the two of them out against Slice much more quicker, much more faster. And in the rematch against 9, it's gonna go about the same. Everyone is holding him back. Jiro is completely giving it her all with her Sonic Scream. Instead of just shooting it through her boots, she's giving her Sonic Scream. But eventually he is able to rebuff almost all of Class 1A, and instead of it just being Bakugo and Deku versus 9, it's actually Bakugo, Deku, and Todoroki versus 9. All three of them are able to work with each other, and they're able to take him down. And when he does go full power, it's actually Deku himself who faces him alone. He doesn't share One for All. He doesn't have that moment with Bakugo. While they do have battle synergy, they're not as close as people as they once were, or even as they are in canon. Even if they are closer than before, they're not as close as they were in canon. Deku's definitely not trusting One for All to him, unless the moment truly calls for it. And it does not, because he is able to, with the help of these advanced full gauntlets, to push himself to full drive 100% with little to no damage to himself, and is able to take down 9. And he briefly showcases a power that truly surpasses All Might, and is able to completely take down 9 completely on his own, by himself. And maybe he's been showing off some control he has over the power of One for All. He actually lets the energy loose from full Cowl, and is able to actually control and guide it. But either way, we move past the Heroes Rising film, but Bakugo and all of Class 1A, and specifically Bakugo and Deku's new inner circle, they have come to realize just how far Deku is going to strive ahead of them and how far they're going to have to push themselves if they want to stand by his side as his friends and trusted confidants. So they end up going back to UA. They're relaxing a little bit after the events of the island of Nabu Island, and Bakugo and Deku still have their same relationship with the two kids. Kasuma still kind of is idolizing Deku, and his sister's kind of idolizing Bakugo. But yeah, it's basically about the same. And here we end up getting to their hero interview training. It's not going to be too different except for the fact that Deku isn't completely stiff. Bakugo isn't as violent as he normally is, and Todoroki is definitely a bit more sociable. And then we get to their second round of work studies. So here, once again, our big three decide to go back to training with Endeavor. They all go to Endeavor's agency. Sorry, someone knocked for a second. Yeah, they go for their training under Endeavor's agency, and it's not going to be all that different. Endeavor and Hawks versus Star Servant is about the same, and the Ryukyu agency against the Oki Marina crew, and the Oki Marina crew against those smugglers. We see some more synergy between Uraraka and Tsuyu. Maybe they pull out some new combo move between the two of them, but nothing too crazy. The main improvement is with Deku. He's now able to manage Black Whip, Float, and Danger Sense, and he's jumped up to around 45% in terms of increasing his one for all percentage. He hasn't had as much time recently to properly develop his percentage, but now with this jump in time, he's able to jump up to around 35 to 45% in terms of what he can handle in. He can handle 35% in full drive, and in full cowling, he can push himself to 45%. So he's made a decent increase in his percentage, and because of that, he's also made an increase in his ability to handle Black Whip. So from here, we end up moving on to Endeavor's mission, or the World Heroes mission. The whole thing with Endeavor and his little mission ends up going about the same. And we have our offense team against, or the Othean team against Humorize. And everything goes about the same at this point. Deku is able to better keep up with Rhodey, but he also wants to see where exactly this guy is heading. But they do get to about a similar situation as in canon. They do end up being confronted by the Othean police, in that the two of them are chased, and Deku and Rhodey do go on the run as in canon. Uraraka is keeping track of the situation through communicating with Todoroki, and gets the fact that Deku does have a plan. She's worried, but she has confidence in him, as do the rest of the group and his mother as well. And she's able to give a status update to Inko, so she's kept in the loop. Everything goes about the same. It's just that Deku is able to handle himself much better against any of his opponents. The Barros and Rogan, he's able to take care of them with little to no injuries. He's practically experienced no injuries. He doesn't have to worry about being injured throughout this entire kerfuffle. And then we have Endeavor's trainees versus Barros and Sudero. Yeah, I don't really know. That goes about the same, as does the pro heroes and all of their students facing off against Humorize. We have Bakugo and Todoroki in their battles against the Serpenters and the Leviathan. And again, goes about the same except for the fact that they can handle themselves better. Maybe Shoto is able to pull off a Flash Fire Fist or an Ice Form equivalent. He's able to pull out that similar final end battle technique that he pulled at the end of the battle. And Bakugo himself, since he's been training against and with a much more powerful Todoroki and a vastly superior Deku, he's able to maneuver himself around the Serpenters with less injuries than in canon, and is able to completely demolish them, similarly to how he did in canon. He's probably even able to take them out before they can use any trigger. Same with Shoto and Leviathan, if he did do that. And Deku in his battle against Fleckturn goes much more easily. He's much more used to feeling the rebound of his power, because of all of his training in full drive. And once again, he's able to rely on the full gauntlets and full drive at 100% to take down a flex turn with much more ease. And he's able to help Rhodey get to the get the disarming key to that trigger bomb. So they're able to prevent the trigger bomb from and all of the trigger bombs from exploding. He has again no permanent damage to his arms. He's completely fine. And then we get to the beginning of the Paranormal Liberation War arc. I think that's enough for now. I've been able to cover a lot of this very quickly. You realize how fast paced the story is when it's not being separated the way it is like in the manga. Like everything actually happens in a really fast pace. But I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can cover the Paranormal Liberation War. I should probably space it out, but I also kind of don't care. I'm really having a lot of fun just continuing with all of this. But here we get into the beginning of the Paranormal Liberation War. We have the villa raid at that at the mountains. Uh, the villain raid team goes up against the Liberation Front, and they're able to handle that all about the same. Same with Hawks in his battle against Twice and Dabi. Tokoyami ends up going up against Dabi, and again, this is all happening about the same. The main thing is when they end up facing off against Gigantomachia, but that's going to come in a minute. Just that the students are going to be able to handle themselves better, particularly once again with Deku's group, but this has also caused a ripple effect. So everyone's just a little bit stronger. They're able to handle themselves better, and they have more synergy as a whole team and as a whole class. We end up getting the hospital raid at Jaku Hospital. It all goes about the same. Mirko still faces off against the high ends, and nothing really changes all that much. Crust has his battle against Chubbs, and he ends up dying too when Shigaraki ends up awakening. We get the hospital raid team going up against the rest of the high end Nomus, or the near high ends, and we also get our rematch between Uravity and Froppy against Toga. And here they're with their level of synergy, the way they've been practicing with one another, like they're able to maneuver themselves around the battlefield. Suyu is able to swing Uraraka around, and she's able to boost herself with some air boosters she's gotten from Melissa so that she can maneuver through the air better. And she's able to make better use of her grappling hooks after learning from Deku and his Black Whip, Sero and his tape, and even Suyu and her tongue. She's able to maneuver herself around the battlefield despite Himiko Toga's ability to seemingly disappear. Training with someone who has danger sense and who has learned the predictability from Mirio and Night Eye, they're able to actually handle themselves against like Toga's surprise attacks well enough that they're able to eventually escape, and they're able to beat her back and escape and get back to the main battle, where Best Jeanist and all the trainees are able to face off against the Paranormal Liberation Front. We have the main battle on the battlefield. Deku versus Shigaraki, or everyone versus Shigaraki. It's going to be extremely intense. It's going to unfold similarly to how it does in canon, at least at first. Shigaraki is going to escape, and Deku is going to be able to sense it. He rushes off with Bakugo and Todoroki following him this time instead. They end up meeting against Shigaraki, who, since he was able to, like I said, he got a better handle of his quirk awakening than in canon. So I don't know if I would have him at a higher percentage, like his assimilation with the One for All and or with All for One and all of those quirks. But at this point, Deku has far surpassed. He's jumped up to around 45% of what he can handle in full drive. So he's about the same level that Vigilante Deku was. That's what he is at right now. He's jumped up to around 45% in full drive if he needs to. It's a little more draining than any of his previous percentages, but it's what he can handle. And he's able to face off against Shigaraki with it. With it, he's able to practically match him using his combination of quirks. Instead, in this battle, he ends up unlocking Smokescreen. You might be like, what use is Smokescreen gonna be in this battle? He actually uses it to disorient Shigaraki, because he literally has no idea what's happening. He doesn't really know all about Deku and all of his quirks. He knows that he has Black Whip from some reports, but he has no idea what this does screen. So he's able to like briefly get everyone away from the battle. Aizawa doesn't have to sacrifice his leg, and Lemillion has been here from the start, so he hasn't had to get himself restored. He was there from the start. Um, Deku is able to hold him off all by himself much more easily than in canon. He's not risking his arms in the battle, although he does eventually destroy the full gauntlets, maybe when Shigaraki gets his hands on them, although he quickly substituted it with Black Whip, and he's able to use Black Whip to completely wrap around his arms, similarly to what the full gauntlet did, and he's able to continue to pummel away at Shigaraki, and he's able to do so without having to worry about without doing too much damage to his arms, since he's using Black Whip the way he is. He's keeping it compressed all around his arm. It was something he practiced on his own just in case he ever destroyed the full gauntlets. And since he has some practice with it, he's able to get away with using Black Whip and all of his quirks at like 100%. He's constantly feeling the danger through danger sense. He's constantly like maneuvering everyone else away from Shigaraki, and here he doesn't have his moment where he freezes up and Bakugo ends up getting stabbed, or at least he wouldn't if it wasn't for the fact that yeah, I don't think he would have that moment. But if he does briefly freeze up, maybe due to the fact that he has to adjust to using 45% full drive, if he does freeze up and he's unable to get out of the way, and Bakugo does get stabbed, he is gonna have a similar rage moment because they've been building up their relationship again. They weren't at the level in the battle against Nine. They weren't at the level where he would have trusted him with One for All because he didn't really need to. But at this point, they have developed back into a friendship. Bakugo still hasn't apologized, but he does still get pissed when he sees what happens to him, and he ends up completely thrashing Shigaraki. Again, he's not as pissed, so he doesn't lash out the same way he does, but he is still angry. He doesn't like seeing anyone get hurt, especially anyone he considers important to him. So he is going to keep himself in the battle. He's going to keep his head in the game, and he's able to last until Dabi arrives. This is where he begins to flag, and despite that, he is still able to continue battling. He doesn't collapse into the bloody mess that he was at the end of the battle, but everyone is able to get away. The villains are able to make a retreat. Aizawa does still lose his leg, but I don't know if I don't think he would lose an eye. He wouldn't lose one of his eyes. He's lost one of his legs, but he hasn't lost one of his eyes. Deku ends up collapsing to his knees, especially after having to jump into the battle with Dabi when he arrives with Kanganto Makia. He arrives in a bit of a rage. He's kind of worried about what happened with everyone else, and he's dragging Shigaraki behind him. And he actually confronts and battles against Kanganto Makia and Shigaraki, while Dabi is being dealt with by Todoroki, and Endeavor is sitting there useless, having a panic attack. And yeah, I would say that this ends up ending just about the same. Just for the fact that Deku isn't in critical condition, he's not going to be falling into a coma, but he is going to pass out from sheer exhaustion, and he has done some level of damage. He's like received some hairline fractures to his bones. He stressed out his body to an insane degree, so he does end up passing out. And his last thoughts before passing out are focused on Uraraka and Bakugo and everyone else's condition. He's worried about all of his friends, and he's gonna end up having his similar conversation in the Vestige world. And the assault on Tartarus is still gonna happen. All of that's gonna happen. Everyone escapes just about the same. And yeah, I think this is about where I'm gonna end it because my voice is really giving out on me, and I need to go eat. But yeah, the Liberation War ends about the same, just with the fact that Aizawa doesn't lose his leg, or he lost his leg, but he doesn't lose his eye. Deku isn't as insane condition, so he's probably going to be awake by the same time that Bakugo and everyone else is awake and about. And he was able to do some significant damage to not just Shigaraki, but he was actually able to land a few solid hits on Giganto Makia. And he was able to send them running with their tails in between their legs, but he couldn't pursue. He ended up exhausting himself. Gran Torino, I would have said Gran Torino would have sent him into a rage. Gran Torino is still injured similarly to in canon, and everyone is going to be sent into the hospital, and the heroes are going to have to recover as the villains begin their assault on Tartarus. So yeah, Lemillion never lost his quirk, so Eri is still waiting to be used. That sounded wrong, especially with everything that's gone wrong in her life. But yeah, she still has her energy all stockpiled, and we obviously have a very prime candidate that everyone has wondered about, but that everyone knows about. There was theories about it forever, but yeah, we ended off with Deku. He's unlocked more of his quirks early. He unlocked Smokescreen in the midst of the battle, and it was kind of useless, but it did give them a moment of breathing room, thankfully, before Shigaraki completely squashed the moment. And he's already at 45% for his full drive instead of just full cowl. With this, he was able to actually bully Shigaraki pretty easily, but Shigaraki was still a threat, and he ended up decommissioning Gran Torino, and he cost Aizawa his leg. So we'll see what ends up happening in the next part that I will be posting tomorrow. Probably. Depends. It's going to be the weekend, so I don't know. We'll see. I don't know when these are going to be going up. They might go up over the weekend or on Monday. But either way, like, comment, subscribe if you really liked what you saw and what I've been doing with this. Leave any potential criticisms you may have, any plot holes or characters, anything that I may have left behind, things that you would have done differently, some ideas that I may end up using in the future that I may want to pursue for different what ifs. And if you're going to be a dick, don't even bother commenting. Just go find something else to do with your time. That'll be all for today. See you all later.